Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to be with you here in Cannes. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us.
My pleasure.
Huge congratulations on this incredibly bold, original film. For people who haven't seen The Wave, though, yet, can you give us a brief intro? What can they expect going in?
It's a journey. It's a cinematic experience. It's a musical. It's a political musical that mixes very contemporary challenges and problems with splendor and scale and the playfulness that the musical genre demands. It's quite a journey.
In terms of, events that have happened within the feminist movement over the last decade or so, probably the most familiar is, the Me Too movement. But people might not be as familiar with these protests that happened in Chile in 2018.
Yeah.
It's kind of a microcosm of what was going on broadly, but also quite distinct. So what was sort of really compelling to you about zeroing on this particular movement at this particular time?
Yeah, well, as a Chilean person, I've been very aware of what the feminist movement has been doing, their struggles. In Chile, it's very strong, it's very organized, it's very influential in a way. And there is a young feminist movement that is very energetic and active and quite admirable. And I was I was there in 2018 when the female students occupied the universities, masked with self-made masks, in quite an iconic moment. And I saw a photo of the next day of I don't know, like 50 women with the masks. A moment full of energy, full of rebelliousness, and also a sort of even like joy, of a mix of rage and real thirst for change. And then I saw how that was appropriated by politics, phagocytated, agreements happened, the facade of changed was established, but very little changed. There was some change, but that's, I guess, how the world works. There are moments where the level of consciousness opens a little window to maybe push things. When it's taken, things get a little messy. It gets neutralized. And what probably changes is the general consciousness, which is, I think, something that Feminist May, as it's called in Chile, contributed. But yeah, the world is very slow. And in a certain way, the film observes the mechanics of the attempt for change and the way in which power and the establishment deals with that.
Was it always in your head that it would take this form? Because I guess when I was thinking about other films that are maybe trying to tackle quite weighty issues, ones that are quite sensitive, maybe they veer towards being quite serious, quite earnest. But here you kind of blow all that open, and it's quite audacious to, have these musical numbers, bring in all this nuance, but also a lot of playfulness. So how did the form come about? And why do you think that kind of gives us a completely different way in to talking about these subjects?
Well, I think, one of the beauties of the musical genre is that it allows to talk about things or express things for which words are not enough. So in the Hollywood tradition, feelings and hopes and dreams are so big that at some point they burst into dance and music. And that expressionism, that fantastic dimension of it, is just so cinematic, and it belongs so much to cinema, and it's full of potential, and it asks for inventiveness and playfulness and obliquous strategies to talk about what is unexpressible in words. And the same with the more political musical tradition. It's the same. It's not about hopes and dreams or sentiments. It's about politics. So the issues are difficult to talk about. So the musical genre appears as a way to, again, through dance and music to talk about what is hard to talk about, and to express what probably words cannot express in a way that is not earnest and serious. You can't be serious if you want to talk seriously. You need to find strategies. Otherwise, it becomes lecturing, and it has to be an experience. So I think that's why the combination of politics and spectacle, of real urgent problems that require the maximum respect, the maximum commitment, combined with scale, madness, game, and an aesthetical splendor.
I mean, what an incredible cast. And it feels like, you must have almost had this feeling of energy amongst yourselves, on set, just to create all these dance numbers, all these incredible moments, particularly in Daniela as your Julia, which I believe was kind of this really broad casting call, to find a new face. And wow, what a person to land on. I mean, I guess in some ways might have that been a bit of a risk, or did you just feel it in your gut that this was the right person to lead your film?
A bit of both. I mean, it's always a risk. Everything is a risk, but because a lot of the film happens in campuses, in the university. We needed a big sort of like company of performers, so that's why we did a vast casting process. We saw, I think, more than 1,000 submissions, and out of that came Daniela was among them, and I was immediately moved by her presence and her sweetness and intelligence. I thought she was amazing, and then we started building the casting around her. But really, the film is also introducing a whole new generation of performers. It's like 100 new performers. So that's something that makes me very... I think it's a privilege to have the chance to say, listen, it's not only Daniela, it's, amount of very talented, passionate, very young, new performers that were doing a film for the first time.
And maybe you can tell us a bit about putting together the choreography, the music. I know you had on board these female Chilean composers, and the choreography itself is so kind of inventive. Every scene seems so meticulously put together. So what were sort of the more technical aspects of making that all happen?
It was a huge challenge, because we don't make musicals in Latin America. There's no film musical tradition. If you ask people which one is the Latin American musical, everyone goes, right. So we don't have our West Side Story. We don't. There have been musicals made by Alan Parker, for example, did Evita in English in Argentina. But that's not a Latin American musical. Odiar did Emilia Perez, or Camille did Black Orpheus in the late 50s in Brazil. So and that's all right. Anyone should be entitled to anything anywhere. But I think we're somewhere else, because La Ola is a film conceived, thought, filmed, produced and filmed from Chile, from Latin America, and it's an act of thinking done from there, with our reality, our bodies, our lack of tradition, for good or bad. And so no one knew how to make a musical from the team. And we were very lucky to collaborate with a great choreographer, Ryan Heffington, who moved to Chile for several months. And he has this sort of like morale, which is like anyone can dance. And dance is not necessarily about virtuosity. Anybody is entitled to dance. And he loves to work with what is there. So he worked with our lack of tradition, with our lack of virtuosism, and made that part of the aesthetics of the film. So, and the same with the music. The music was, the numbers, the songs were co-composed by 17 female composers. So it's all a collaboration and a way of sharing power, of co-creating, trying to find a coherence between the subject that we are observing, analyzing, exploring, and the way in which the film generates its own materials. So yeah, we learned as we went, making mistakes, but we found our own solution to it.
And maybe it's like asking you to choose one of your favorite children, so it doesn't really work. But like, do you have a favorite number when you watch it back now? I mean, I guess towards the end, it feels like that climax of where they're all dancing together in the central part of the university feels like a real high point. But maybe you have a personal favorite number.
There is a moment towards the end when she, after there is a verdict, and you can understand what will happen. And she comes out of the university at night, and sort of like the whole society is there to celebrate. And it's a long shot leading her, and it's like 400 people. And it's quite intense, and I'm very fond of that moment.
And in terms of the takeaways from the film, I think what I love about it is, rather than, like we said at the beginning, instead of sort of being very earnest, trying to, convey one really coherent message, it leans in to the contradictions, it leans into the complexities and the nuances. And even as, we reach towards the end of the film, actually, has progress really been made? Because now we're sort of seeing a bit of regression and a backlash, or, the playful moment that you break the fourth wall and say, oh, well, I'm a hetero male director or whatever. Should I be the person that's telling this story? But there's this energizing feeling towards the end of it, and the way you sort of focus in on her voice being itself a form of protest. I wonder if that's the main takeaway is, okay, we might not have all the answers, but all having that sort of collective moment together, talking about things, making your voice heard, still is important in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid perspective. But I'd say, the film tries to... It's not a film about what I think. That would be a little reductionist. And it's about what many people think, about the demands of the movement. So it's sort of like the portrayal of a political cacophony, which is also like what we're going through as a global society. Everyone has an amplifier and everyone has a voice. We end up with a lot of noise. And it's the narrative war is declared at plain sight, and it's a very confusing moment, and especially talking about the last of making progress in terms of civil rights, women's rights, and now I wouldn't even say it's a backlash. I think it's revenge in front of their faces. It's revenge. It's like to your place, and it's I don't know. I think it's outrageous, and I think they got scared because things tended to go towards a more balanced agreement, social agreement. So to try to go to your point, I think, of course it's political. Of course the bills and the laws and we need the public policies to educate and to... But ultimately, our level of consciousness, if we don't make our consciousness grow, our social consciousness, our understanding where we are a little bit, this will continue for a long time, and the pendulum will go one way, and then rights will be recovered, but then another backlash will come. And I think the film is a little bit about that, the will for change, the appropriation of power to any type of rebelliousness, phagocytating it. The facade of change is established. Not much changes, but the consciousness, I think, because I'm an optimist, changes. And people, now we have new vocabulary, now we can name things, and now we can maybe wait for the next wave to hopefully create change that could, consolidate and be part of, become structural.
And just finally, what does it mean to you to have the film here in Cannes? And I wonder how you see this film as part of your filmography, because if you kind of maybe look at common threads between your work, you know, it's like definitely delving into the female experience. But this was quite a different take on, you know, in terms of the medium you've used in your other films. So how do you see this fitting in with what you've done so far?
A very organic next step. I'm very interested in genres. I've been very observant of the last decades of the musical genre, feeling that it has been a bit behind aesthetically. It has been mainly about nostalgia exercises, about the golden era, but the sharpness, the danger, the urgency of the musicals from the 70s, you know, Bob Fosse, among many others, and also like, to me personally, the last real musical that pushed things forward and expanded the medium was Dancer in the Dark, and that's 2000. That's 25 years ago, and somehow it has been alive because the genre has never died, but it has been alive in kids' films, and that's where it can be free. That's something I was really willing to attempt. It's kind of like the enhanced version of the themes I've been working for a few years now.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Huge congratulations and an
Thank
absolutely
you.
incredible film. I really enjoyed presenting it here in Cannes. Thank you.
Thank you.